Welcome to a Fish Out of Water podcast. This is your host, Richard Lipman. Today, we are interviewing Ian Berry. This is part 2 of 2. This podcast is kindly supported by Camera Museum of London, pre-owned Hasselblad specialists located at 44 Museum Street, London, WC1A 1LY. Visit the website on www.cameramuseum.uk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
For some reason it wouldn't let me in.
Yeah, I sent you 3 links. So one at about 12, and then the next one at about 1:45, and now it's about 2. They're all different links. That's why you probably got a recent previous link.
Didn't want to know me anyway.
Yeah, this is the current link. There are different links to different Zoom sessions at different times. This is the current one. Thanks very much. Tell me, has there been a documentary about your works or books that you can tell us about?
Lots and lots of magazine articles. And I mean, I've done a dozen books, but most of them, well, I did the English, 2 South Africa books, one on child slavery, 2 for the Spanish fishing industry, and then 8 or 9 for a French publisher, for which he paid me very well. And some of them were a bit silly. I mean, my wife is a journalist, and the first one was the 30 best restaurants in France, and then 30 best restaurants in Italy, and then the 30 best restaurants in Spain. So we kind of put on a lot of weight for a period. I did the best, or rather the main, what was it called in French? I can't think of the word in English. The main squares, if you like, in Europe. I mean, sporting horse, quite fun. I can't tell a horse from a camel at 10 paces, but there you go.
The French one, was it Les Grands Travaux or Black and White's L'Afrique du Sud?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me, what's the remuneration like? What since you were working in the 60s, has that fluctuated? Is it inconsistent, or how is that?
Well, I mentioned to you that I met a chap at a gallery, and he is being paid less than I was being paid 30 years ago in actual money, not in,
Wow.
Staggering, absolutely staggering.
Do you think?
I don't know how they make a living these days.
Well, do magazines sell less? Is it also a problem? The internet, digital, everything is available for free, or at least partially.
Yeah. No, it's I do feel sorry. I mean, I give these workshops, and when some sort of 20-year-old asks what they should be doing, try something else. It's not that bad, but I mean, the good photographers will always succeed, but it's not as easy unless you're prepared to specialize. If you want to do fashion, advertising, specialize and do it. And if you're any good, you'll make a living. I think Annie Leibovitz has done quite well for herself. So it's always possible.
And what about the young photographers you meet today at Magnum? What's your relationship with them today?
Good with the editorial guys. male and female. I just had the major exhibition at Visa pour l'Image in Perpignan, and which is the one exhibition that photojournalists want to be at. And God, my memory for names now. And we have a lady photographer who's doing really good photojournalism, working out of Moscow, who had an exhibition there, and
Is
she's
she with
doing
Magnum?
okay.
Is she with Magnum?
Yeah, yeah.
Is she still right? Isn't it a bit sensitive to do journalism in Moscow? Oh, here we go.
She seems to manage.
Okay. Let me see. Photographer, it would be good for our audience to know. Oh, there's something called Three Visions of Moscow. I don't know how recent that is. 2024. Have you been to Moscow?
Yeah.
What was your impression?
Well, I learned how to drink vodka. Um, this is one of these things. You meet someone in the street and they say, God, so and so Russians are terrible people, and so on and so forth. And when you're there on the spot, they're great, So um, they're not all like Putin. Um, I had a good time there. The only sad thing is that you can't really export. Oh, my memory. What do you call these icons?
Oh, yes. Russian dolls.
You
Oh,
know, the icons. I don't know what the word is for them now, but um, you're not allowed to export them, and I've been very tempted because sometimes you
is
come
it
across.
is there some sort of Greek Orthodox? Are we talking about artwork here? What are we talking?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Byzantine. These icons follow models and formulas. Um,
Well, anyway, it doesn't matter, but it's other than that, um, you can't export stuff, which is annoying. I would like to have bought a terrific samovar, an original one. You could buy an electric one anywhere and export it, but to buy an original one, you can't. And I
hmm,
know my wife would have liked one, but
right. I'm looking here. We have there's the Russian photographer. Is it Nana Haitman?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, she's terrific.
Why do you say she's terrific?
Because she's got an eye. And we've got a lot of photographers in Magnum recently, and who don't have an eye. Um, so when you do meet one, it's great. And she's a nice lady.
There was another photographer as well. I have one or two of her books. And she also went to Russia. Well, I suppose, she doesn't live there. She's a Belgian photographer. She went on a train and would stay the night at strangers' houses and take photographs of them. Bieke déporté. What's your opinion of that concept of staying with strangers and photographing their lives?
As a woman, I would have thought very brave and very crazy. But I mean, not something I would like to do as a bloke, never mind as a woman, but she's obviously a tough lady.
Have you met her?
Um, I think at one of the meetings, one of the annual general meetings, yes.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's hard for young photographers to make a living now.
What do you think audiences are looking for today? When you say good photographer, what's a good photographer today? And what's a good photographer back in the 60s?
I think much the same, really. But one of the problems in this country, it's run by POBs, and
What's a POB?
oh, a print-orientated bastard. Um, you know, who become picture editors by default or and don't know the first thing about photography. Um, so I don't want to be too critical. I can't afford to be too critical, but uh, the Brits are not that visual as people. Um, it's like when I was doing corporate, terrific to go off and shoot for a French designer, um, because you could be pretty sure that they knew what they were doing. An American designer, it's hit and miss. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they want to give you a drawing of what they want, and that's what they want, even if it doesn't exist, you know. um, but the French, the Italians are terrific too. Um, I've done good annual reports for Italians, and it's fun to do. You know, they'll say, we've got 3 factories, go there, spend a week in each, and let's see what they're doing. And you come back and you can show them the whole thing, you know, which is great. But the Brits are not that good.
What do you mean by great and not good? How do you mean with aesthetics?
Uh, the French and the Italians are more visually orientated, you know. I mean, we've got great writers, great authors. Not that the French don't, but few photographers really, considering the size of the country and the population. Um, you know, not that many great photographers.
You said you had an archive. How many negatives or film? How many film prints? I mean, negatives and prints do you think is in your archive?
I couldn't count, couldn't begin to count. Um, you know, I've been working for a long time, and I've got, luckily, I've got a fairly reasonable sized house, and I've got one room just contains color Kodachromes in cabinets like that. Another room that just contains prints. Um, and I've got the whole of the loft from which I'm talking, which is my workspace. And my wife has an office, as a journalist, has an office down on the ground floor. So we have a lot of space, but we need it. It's amazing how it fills up.
Do you scan your negatives today?
I do. I don't have to. We have a great guy at Magnum who will do it, but I like to do it. It's a bit like the dark room, you know. Whether you like, I tend to not go for great sort of highlights, but I go for the blacks more. And you can control that yourself if you scan it yourself. This is contrary to Cartier-Bresson, I guess, who liked everything on a rather flat grey across.
Uh-huh.
But we all have our quirks.
Right. And but it takes quite a long time, right? Are you using the Nikon 9000 scanner?
Yes, long time out of business, but this one here still holds up and works. I dread to think what will happen if it packs up because they never updated them. And not many people making scanners these days.
Yeah, the last sale, I think, for the official sale for the Nikon 9000. I think it was 2004. I think it was discontinued then.
Mm.
Well, 20 years ago,
Yeah,
approximately.
yeah. And this one's still soldiering on.
Yeah, I mean, it produces fantastic detail, and it really, yeah, it's very. I have one here. It's great
Uh-huh.
for negs.
Yeah.
Use the
I had a,
German silver
what was it,
plus.
Swiss or Swedish one, which was very good.
Yes, the Hasselblad.
That
That's,
same kind.
I think so.
But
So,
it broke down all the time, and it costs a fortune to send it back to be repaired because you pay both ways.
right, right.
And
That's discontinued now.
I gave up on it, you know. Yeah.
For the X1, I think it's the X5 and X1. Fantastic. You said you're using digital. Are you also taking photos digital?
Oh, yeah.
How do you find it?
Well, I'm one of the people who accepted it, and the first ones were pretty awful, but it's got better and better. And I'm kind of interested in the shape. I'm not a landscape photographer looking for the ultimate detail and so on. I'm interested in what's there in the shape. Um, I don't care too, I'm not a technical guy at all. And I don't care too much about the pixels, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Photography yourself.
Yeah, I photograph a little bit here and there for clients, or sometimes it gets published as well. I can send you a link. Also
No, well, I
from
like that,
freelance.
but you know what I mean when I say,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love shooting analog. I,
yes, well, it's tempting. I've still got three analog Leicas, and but it's expensive. I've got a friend who bought himself a Leica mono um,
right.
analog one,
Oh, okay.
went up and shot a story. And it was great in the days when you gave your film into the lab and went away and had a good lunch and came back and picked up your contacts and so on. But it's not so great when you get the bill. Um, it's going to cost you about 15 quid a roll. And as he shot 100 rolls,
Hmm.
it made it an expensive shoot.
I developed them myself. So there was quite a well-known developer in London. I think he used to develop film for David Bailey. He was working up in King's Cross, and he was the best. He would develop them by hand using fresh chemicals.
Yeah.
So I use his technique pretty much using fresh chemicals. A friend of mine, Tony Rizzo, who's also interviewed in the series, taught me how to develop film. And he very much is part of your technique and generation of shooting without necessarily sort of capturing things as they are without much manipulation.
Mm. Well, the other problem is, of course, balancing stuff that you shot in the past. If you're doing a book, balancing film with digital and the different appearance it has. Um, it can be overcome. I was asked the other day to do a short piece on Salgado, Sebastião Salgado, and he is terrific. He's got a guy who explained the technique to me, but in French, and my French is kitchen French. And I partially followed it, but somehow he makes a 4x5 negative from the scan and is able to give it the appearance of film. So that if Sebastian has pictures in a book, he can balance the film stuff with the digital stuff and it looks the same. But normally, most people, I can't do that. So if you look carefully, you can see the difference. You know, in this water book I've just done, there are pictures that I can see that that are ones that I shot on film and scanned from the black and white or from the color.
Mm. So, and digitally, which camera are you using?
Well, I've gone from a lifetime of Leica to using Olympus
Okay.
Macro Four.
Okay. Interesting. So the ones you shot on film, I can see here, you've got quite a few from Bangladesh. There's one in New Zealand, that's 1998. I'm looking at the more recent ones. 2004, Wales, that's a great shot. With the wind farm, with the wind farm in the background and the horse. I assume that was film, right?
I think that might have been color,
Oh, that was color.
color negative.
Right.
I had a period of shooting color negative, Fuji. Um, and I can't remember, you probably know it. I went along, I was going to do something on the wind farm, and I got there the day earlier. This is in Wales. And I went down to have a look. And I don't use very long lenses. I'm very much a wide angle lens shooter. And I saw the wind farm out there, and this was late in the day, a bit misty, and not much I could do. And I saw this horse coming along on the beach, took one frame, and I proved that horses have all four hooves off the ground at the same time. And who was the guy who spent years setting up electronic um, uh, cameras to photograph horses as they run? I can't remember his name. Um, to prove that horses have their hooves occasionally all four off the ground. Well, I proved it at 200th of a second and one frame,
That
which was
was
quite.
two hundredth, and what about the f-stop?
God knows now. I can't remember. Can't remember, but just enough to get the wind farms in the background.
Right, right. It's probably more than 5.6.
Yes, because it was not the longest lens I have is a 70 to 200.
Right, right.
Uh,
And you were using a 50 on that one, or was it a
and
70
it,
to
it could have been a 70 to 200 Nikon zoom.
Okay, fantastic. And tell me about there was a photograph of Nelson Mandela up. There's a poster of Nelson Mandela and some people walking on top of the by the poster. Did that
Yeah,
just happen spontaneously, or
oh,
were you
totally,
hanging around?
totally. I was there for his when he became president,
Right.
and it was I had known him before this time, so knew him slightly. But I think I got to South Africa maybe 10 days before the election,
Right.
the election that brought him to power. And I think my press pass was like 360 something. There are so many photographers there. And he would sort of go out and hold these meetings in football fields. And the football fields in Johannesburg have 15 feet high wire to stop people throwing stuff, I suppose, or getting in on the thing. And so it was a case you'd photograph Mandela and then you'd run around to the back of 100 other photographers and wait for him to photograph him again. It got boring, totally boring. But I was going off to, I think, to somewhere in Natal anyway,
Mm.
and trying to get there before him. And went through this town and saw this poster. The kids all waiting for him to drive by. And for me, it was more fun than anything I shot on the sports field. Um, I did get a couple of exclusives with him, but one when he went to meet the widow of a former PAC. PAC was the competition for the ANC at the time, but he went to see this woman after her husband died. And then I had something else in the hospital with him. But that for me, thousands of pictures I shot of him. There was not so bad when I then got to the venue. He was going to a university,
Mm-hmm.
and I had all the kids with their flags waving and lots of movement. But that picture I like the best.
I agree. It's fantastic. Encapsulates the moment and encapsulates the people as well. You also took a picture of him in 1961 as a tribunal
Yeah.
before he was
That
sentenced.
was during the treason trial in Johannesburg, and he was then a lawyer
Mm.
for
Mm.
the accused.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was the first time I met him, but I had no idea then what he was going to become. And he really was a super guy. But, you know,
Were you allowed to visit him in jail?
no, I never tried. I was banned at that time. Um, I couldn't go for about 8 years.
Wow.
Um, I, I got a very polite telegram or letter saying, you know, don't come back. If you do, you won't be allowed in.
Well, it's better than saying come back and then we'll throw you in jail.
Exactly. Too true. Yeah.
I see that you also, in 1961, you were in the mine workers scuffle. Um, how do you know when to go to these places? Back then, there was no mobile phone, no computers. How do you know when things are happening?
Well, in South Africa, that was probably the time um, I was with drum. And so, excuse me, so they had a fairly regular people phoning in to say things were happening. And, you know, yeah.
Today, they'd call them, would they call them fixers or would they call them, I mean, would these people get paid to,
Yeah, essentially that, yes.
right,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Okay. Things remain the same. What about Latin America? You have any experience there?
Yeah. I've done quite a bit I did all the countries in Central America for the UN for an exhibition. They were having a meeting in the New York UN building, and they wanted pictures. This was for the what are the UN initials? The UN refugees.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I was going for refugee camps. That was Central America. Um, South America, I've done less. Uh, I did a lot of shoots for British Gas in South America. Um, and I did one story on which everybody has done on gauchos. And I've never been able to ride a horse. They always chuck me off. So I followed the gauchos around on a trail motorbike. I used to ride motorbikes.
Right.
Uh, and that worked better than being on a horse because you can stop it when you want. And it'll go when you want. You know? Yeah. But there are a lot of countries in South America, I haven't been to. It's a part of the world that I've been several times to Brazil and a few times to the Argentine, but there are places I haven't been. I haven't been right down to the south.
Have you visited Saldago's place in Brazil?
Not to his place in Brazil. I have, of course, to his place in Paris, but not Brazil.
What about the people? You think back then was it also easy to photograph them, or was the sensitivity is different?
Yeah, um, using common sense. I mean, I went to a festival, the annual festival in Rio for the carnival,
Mm.
um, and the magazine I went for had a lady photographer who was Brazilian, was local, and I wanted to shoot in the favelas,
Mm.
the poor.
Yeah, it can be quite
Um,
dangerous.
and she said, well, be jolly careful, that you keep your cameras hidden and so on. I've kind of always felt it's better to be up front. And so I've always wandered around with my cameras and so on. I agreed to meet her after a couple of hours. Um, she took me there in her car. And when I came back, she had uh, she'd had her wallet stolen. I had no trouble at all. And it was quite funny because we were sitting in the car talking about it and waste of time talking to the police. And a guy walked by and chucked her wallet in through the car window. And the money was gone, but all her credit cards and press passes all in the wallet. But she was the expert.
Okay. What now? Were you in the favela, in the hills?
Yes.
Were you at the
Yeah.
bottom? Right.
Yeah, I walked around, had no problem.
Okay. And were you taking pictures of people?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
sure.
So I'm going to ask you very quick questions. Quick answers is all good. We got about 10 minutes. Um, how many assignments would you do every year? I mean, would you be on an assignment, for example, 10 months a year from 62 onwards?
Well, my wife was doing a story list recently, and at the peak, I was doing maybe 30, sometimes 40 assignments a year. And it's gradually sort of slumped and slumped and slumped. And now I assign myself essentially. I mean, the water book was still completely self-financed.
What about having an agent? Was it good to have an agent, or would you have rather gone freelance or work for the papers?
Well, having been a member of Magnum my whole life, it was terrific at times. But let me just say it's now less terrific. Uh,
Why is it different today?
well, the photographers have changed, and I, I've been vice president in both Paris and London. And when I was doing that, I kept an eye on everything that was happening, on the finance, who was being hired. Um, if anyone needed to be fired, I had to do it. Um, these days, photographers have given up and they have CEOs who they hire to run it. And so, as a member, I now have not a clue what's going on in Magnum, essentially, um, which is very sad because London has not had an editorial person for the last 20 years. So I don't have much contact with London. Paris, luckily, has always been the major office for Magnum, and they have some good people there. But I mean, there are a couple of good people in London, but not in my sort of field.
How did I assume From what you've told us, there was maybe more of a sort of collegiate teamwork atmosphere. You know, people would share more. Was there much competition?
Yes, there's always competition. I mean, at the time of the Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia, I had a call from our Paris bureau chief saying, early in the morning, about 6 in the morning, saying, I've just spoken to Don McCullin, and he set off for Prague. Well, that was a red rag to a bull for me. Do you want to go? I'm on my way. Unfortunately, everyone knew that this was coming, and I had a visa, but it had expired. So I went into London. They gave me a visa immediately, went to Heathrow, and the plane that one should have been on was full and had gone to Vienna, which was the obvious place to go to get in. And I ran into a BBC journalist, and he said, "Why not, um, go through Germany?" So I flew to Munich, and I had a car and headed off in. And I was a bit nervous. This was the same day, because I figured I wouldn't be very popular in a German registered hire car. And as I was driving to finally, I was lucky on the plane. I read a newspaper about an architectural forum that was going on in Prague at that time. So when I came to the border, there were a whole load of journalists at the bottom, and they said, "You're wasting your time. We've all tried, and we've been turned back. Having come this far, I've got to try." So I went up, and I had luck. A Russian officer had just taken control of the border, and I could see the Czechs. They knew who I was, for God's sake. They could just, by looking at my clothing and so forth. And the Russian officer said, "Why do you want to come?" And I said, "I'm going to this architects convention." And I think he simply wanted to show the Pragues that he had the authority, and he let me in. And I was the only person to get in of anybody. Nobody got in from Vienna on that day. So I had it to myself. I had the invasion to myself for about 4 days, I think. There was a German photographer from Stern, Hilmer Pabel, who was working on a film that was being shot nearby. And there was a crazy Czech photographer called Josef Kudelka, who was there shooting. And I was lucky. I just had ran 2 editions off.
Don't mind. I'm gonna ask you the last few questions, but I've got to do so in 10 minutes because my time's up on Zoom. But if I could call you back in 10 minutes, and then, just last few questions, I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Oh. All right, here we go.
Right.
Okay, last one this time. Right. Before we leave, actually, I was thinking of an idea of a short documentary where you would, for one day, discuss a certain portion of your archives, to do with an event or an important current and past moment in history. So my question is, when you got to Prague in '68, right?
Yeah.
You crossed the border. What happened next?
I drove headed towards Prague, with my German registered Volkswagen. And I had tanks coming. It was dark by this time. I had tanks coming the other way. I checked into the main hotel in Prague, Alcron, I think. I'm not sure. And they had closed their kitchen, and it didn't reopen the whole time I was there. So I spent 4 days starving with nothing but water to drink. And I was out on the street early the next morning, as were the Russians.
Did you photograph your journey from the border to the hotel?
Not at all. It was dark nearly all the way.
And once you got out the hotel, did you start taking photographs?
No, it was pretty late in the evening, and I was pretty shot, having been up since 6 the previous day, or that morning, in fact. No, I didn't start until early the next morning.
And you get
And it just
right. No, I'm listening.
no, I was going to say, and I got onto the main street or square. What's it called? Wenceslas Square, I think. And there was lots going on because Russians were still arriving in tanks, and the soldiers that had been dumped on the street didn't know where they were. Some of them thought they were in East Germany. And a lot of the troops were not, how shall I say, uh, not Central Russian troops. They were from all over the place. In those days, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and so on were Russian. So they didn't know where they were at all, and the Czechs were sort of insulting them and shouting at them. Of course, most of the Czechs, of course, spoke Russian. It was quite fun. You sort of bundle in to try and photograph the Czechs insulting someone on a tank, and the soldier would sort of threaten to shoot you and shoot over your head, and you'd run away, and the crowd would open up to let you through and then close down behind you to stop the Russian chasing you. And you get 100 yards down the street into a corner, and someone would drag you into their house or something. It was quite fun one way and another. The Czechs were terrific. They were, really fed up about the whole thing, obviously. It's one way of putting it. Yeah, so there we were.
How many rolls of film did you take?
I shot quite a lot, actually, because things were developing, and sometimes situations that you'd already photographed got better, more interesting. And I had I think something like about 60 rolls, something like that. Yeah. And then after about the fourth day, other guys started to arrive. A French guy I knew had arrived and had his cameras confiscated, so I had to lend him one of my cameras. And I knew it was time to go. I had to make the match deadline. I had a match guarantee. And I was so jiggered on my way out. It was dark, and I fell asleep at the wheel, went into a ditch, and I put my film into the hubcaps, inside the hubcaps, inside the headlamp glass. And there I was sideways on in a ditch, and at night. And, you're always lucky. A guy farmer turned up with his tractor, hauled me out of the ditch. and I beat it back to the airport, and I knew there was a flight to Paris coming up. And I arrived at the airport and ripped off the hubcaps, the headlight glass, actually the passengers, the driver's side door paneling inside, threw it all into the back of the car, and handed the keys back to Avis. And I never heard another word from Avis, didn't complain, nothing. And so I stuck with Avis ever since, wherever I could. And got the flight to Paris and made it in time. So it was all quite fun.
So you managed to hide the negatives where exactly in the car?
Well, rolls of film, actually, cassettes.
Yes.
Yeah, some in the hubcaps. You know, the Volkswagen has a big bulbous, Beetle has a big bulbous hubcap. Got quite a lot in there. The ones I couldn't, I got some in the door paneling and some in the headlight. I took the headlight glass out and put them inside behind the, not anticipating having to drive back at night, which was partially my excuse is partially why I dumped it in the ditch, because I couldn't see very well out of the headlights.
And did you ever photograph the families who took you in?
No, I photographed one of the girls who was protesting, who, because I couldn't get anything to eat anywhere, who produced something to eat for me after a while, the day after. And I never spoke to Kudelka. I mean, I just thought, here's this lunatic with a couple of exacta type Edixa, I think, pre-exacta cameras around his neck with string, what do you call them? The thing that you hold the camera onto.
Camera straps?
String straps, yes. And a cardboard box as a camera bag. And I just thought he was a lunatic, actually, because he was going right up to the Russians and standing on the tanks and God knows what. I have one photograph of him, which I didn't know was him at the time, going around in a truck protesting about the invasion and so forth. So yeah, it was interesting.
Interesting. That could be something there. You won various awards. What was it like? You got the 1959 Nikon World Photo Contest Award, then the British Press Pictures 1959, same year, and then the next year British Press Pictures, then 69 you got the Art Directors, 74 British Arts Council First Photographic Bursary, 77 Nikon Photo Year of Award first ever, 81 Prix of the Year magazine, Missouri School of Journalism, 90 Honorary Fellow University of Lancashire, 95 Honorary Fellow of the RPS, Royal Photographic Society, 2005 National Photo Award. Do these awards help with your career or confidence?
I don't think they help with your career, frankly. It's very nice to have, but you know, I think my wife has all these awards in a bathroom somewhere. So,
if you could do anything again, what would you do?
oh God, there are a million things, aren't there? But nothing that's repeatable. Um, I've been so lucky. I've had a great life. I have a great wife who's these days travels with me quite often to remind me which country we're in on occasion when I forget. Um, and yeah, terrific, really. No complaints.
What are your best and worst moments? that you can recall?
My worst is, I think, possibly the story I told you about in Katanga, where we were stuck up against a wall. I've had unpleasant moments, like being in prison in the Central African Republic, and I was sharing a cell with about 4 Africans, and the food came in one big bowl, and we didn't have any knives or forks. You dug your finger in, and there was like a can in the corner as a loo. I didn't enjoy that. I think I was about 4 days in that. And it was just a case of, I knew I had to pay to get out. I mean, I'd been arrested for spying in the local market. I'm not quite sure what you're spying in that case, but I knew it was a paying job, and I'm not very good at it. You know, you give the guy too little and he keeps you in for a few more days. You give him too much and he thinks, oh, there must be more to come. Um, I, I obviously, sorry?
How'd you get out?
Well, I had my own Land Rover. I'd driven down from London, and I was doing a series of stories for the Encyclopedia Britannica, actually, across West Africa. I think I did about 12 stories, some on different workers, everything from a cocoa farmer to a politician, different artists, everything from a ballet dancer to a guy making bronzes. And I finished actually the shoot and was heading back. Actually, the easiest way was to go on down to South Africa.
Mm.
So I drove across to the Central African Republic, and I wanted to ship across into the Congo, but I got arrested. I got out, got into my Land Rover, which hadn't been touched, headed for the border. But I stopped on the way foolishly at an American mission where they were terrific. They fed me and gave me a bath, which was marvelous. I went on, got to the border, the River Bongi, I think it is, and the ferry was on the other side. I asked a local guy, when will the ferry be back? And he laughed at me and said, it's been there for 6 months. It's got a hole in the bottom. So I had to set to and make a raft to float my Land Rover across, which is easier than you might think. I rented local pirogues, and I got hold of a couple of planks and some rope, roped them together, drove my Land Rover on, and there was a moment when I thought, is it going to float? Is it going to sink? And got across and set off across the Congo, ran into a couple of Frenchmen coming the other way, and they said, look, the Congolese have got guns, but they've no bullets. If they try and stop you, just keep going or they'll take everything. And I took their advice, and only once did they try and stop me. I just put my foot down and went. The problem was it was the rainy season and nothing had been done to the roads since the Belgians left. And so I was driving half on the center hub, the center of the road, of the track, and half in the bush. Of course, I'd slide off occasionally. People were great. I'd had the forethought to buy a load of cigarettes. I don't smoke, actually. And Africans would always appear when you got stuck, help you dig out, and be happy with a few cigarettes, you know. One of the great moments of my life was when I crossed over into Uganda, and there were these smart Ugandan troops who welcomed me to Uganda. And they told me, well, there's a hotel. And it took me 4 days to cross. I mean, one day I did um, the whole day, I did 6 miles digging my way. And I got to this hotel, um, and it was a Lancastrian. I'm a Lancastrian, by the way. And uh, God, I had a bath and a dinner, a food. It was fantastic, great. So I did that, and then I just drove on down to South Africa. Having got there, I couldn't drive back because I couldn't get the visas again. So I went up to Tanzania and got a German cargo boat to take me to, I can't remember now, Bombay or Karachi. I think Bombay.
Right.
And I drove back from Bombay.
Okay, so you love the travel.
Yeah, I did 47,000 miles on that one trip. And anyone who says Land Rovers are crap, I disagree because it only broke down once.
I'd make a great ad for Land Rovers.
Yeah, yeah.
Track across Africa. By the way, what's your favorite picture that you've taken?
I don't have one. The next, the usual corny photographer's response is the one I'll take next week. But really, I don't have one picture that I don't have any pictures of mine in the house. I've got Cartier-Bressons and Marc Ribou's, but none of my own. Um,
Hmm. Do you
you
collect?
sound like you've got the cough that I just had.
Yes, yes. It'll take a few days probably to recover. What about influences? What are your greatest influences?
Um, I suppose inevitably Henri, Eugene Smith is the other guy I like. The great story for me as a photojournalist was Minamata. Do you know the book, Eugene Smith's book on Minamata? It was
Check it.
this factory in Japan that was chucking crap into the water. What was it exactly? Anyway,
Okay.
they
Okay.
were having
Heard
the
that.
local people were having deformed children and so on.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hmm.
He kept shooting that, and finally the thugs from the factory beat him up so badly that he had to give up for a long time, and finally sort of died of the wounds he got from that. So somehow that for me is the epitome of photojournalism. I
That
mean,
one
there are great photographers. Sorry?
was there a book made of that? Eugene Smith's
Yeah, it was called Minimata.
Minimata. Okay. Got it here. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Um, okay. So what are you going to be, you got any plans for the next few weeks, few months? Any plans for the future?
Just going off to next week, I guess, to Estonia.
Right.
Um, but I've got an exhibition and I've got talks to give, and I'm hoping to do something on the military there.
In Estonia.
Um, hmm, it's right up on the border with Russia.
Absolutely. I think there's I think I saw, I'm not sure which Baltic country it was. It might have been Estonia. They have what they called volunteer troops, or people who volunteer as part of the league.
They go at weekends, and yeah,
Oh, that's
I'm
it.
hoping to have a look at them. Yeah. And then I'll probably do a couple of other NATO countries that, see how they're preparing.
Interesting.
Keep me out of mischief for a few weeks.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Ian. I'll send you an email. I'm going to send you an idea that I have. Maybe I'll try to think about it. Um.
Tell
What?
me when I see it.
Well, the idea would be to make a short documentary, maybe in connection with something you did in the past and what's going on in the future, or maybe to link the past and the present.
Okay.
If there were to be a documentary about a specific part of what you did, what do you think would be the most interesting to audiences?
I guess it would be the period between the 70s and the 90s. That's when things were really, really moving. You worked every day. Now I'm working for myself, really. It's too expensive. I mean, this water book I did, as I mentioned earlier, cost me a fortune to do. And apart from the satisfaction of doing it, I don't know, I sell a few prints, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm. What about in Eastern Europe? Do you think that's now the hot topic, or is it something else?
I think it could be interesting. The Swedes have reintroduced conscription.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and as you know, the Swedes historically have always had trouble with Russia. And it's 200 years since they uh, gave up. I mean, they've been independent for 200 years. Um, what's the word I'm looking at? People who don't, like the Swiss, um, they're they don't fight. They
Okay.
give up. It's like the Swiss are, but they've got an army, and they're interesting people, the Swedes. Um,
Have you
might have a
photographed? Have you photographed in Sweden?
Yeah, sure. Um, One of my most embarrassing experiences, I was doing Stockholm for Geo. I did a series of cities. And Friday night, I asked if I could go around in a cop car, picking up drunks and one thing or another. And this cop car picked me up at my rather fancy hotel. I was on expenses. And a guy and a girl, beautiful girl, guy, good-looking guy, both speaking better English than I do. We set off, and I was in the back, and there was this great plastic sheet over. And I thought they must have thought I was going to make a mess of their back seat. But I discovered very quickly it was when they were picking up drunks who were vomiting all over the place. And at the end of the evening, they ran me back to the hotel, and I was covered in vomit from people who'd been sick all over the place. And as I got to the hotel, midnight or so, there had been a ball in the hotel, and people dressed in tuxedos and so on, evening dress, came out. And as I walked in, sort of absolutely filthy and cold, people were sort of moving away from me. And I wasn't sure they'd let me back into the hotel, but they're pretty broad-minded. Um, but it was a great place. I walking down the street and I saw there was a sauna. So I went in and said, do you mind if I shoot some stuff in the sauna?
Mhm.
And the gate man, sort of cashier man, said, I better go and ask them. So he went, came back. Yeah, they said it's okay. And I went in and I realized it was Ladies' Day in there. And all these naked ladies were in the pool. And none of them gave a hoot about my taking photographs of them.
Has that been
Broad-minded
published?
this week.
Has it been published? Were those photographs published?
One of them has been I've used, yes.
Okay.
But it's photographer's life, isn't it? You
Sure.
accidentally get into situations that you haven't anticipated, and sometimes it's fun.
Are you going to visit Sweden on the way to Estonia?
No, I'm taking a direct flight. It's my wife's never been to Tallinn, so
Okay.
she's going to come with me to have a look.
All right. Thank you very much, Ian. It's been fantastic speaking with you. And
Terrific. I hope it works for you, Richard.
thanks. All the best.
You too. I look forward to seeing what you do.
Be in touch
Cheers
soon.
now.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
This is a Fish Out of Water podcast. This is your host, Richard Lippman. Thank you for listening, and should you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please get in touch. This podcast is kindly supported by Camera Museum of London, pre-owned Hasselblad specialists located at 44 Museum Street, London, WC1A 1LY. Visit the website on www.cameramuseum.uk.